Welcome back to This Is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander, tough rules, and cool interactions, episode 141. Today's episode is going to take a look at a fairly new-ish ability from the last few years. It feels more recent, but is actually first seen in Strixhaven in 2021, and has since gained a bit of infamy as something that maybe sees a little bit too much inclusion on creatures lately. The ability I'm talking about is Ward, and this episode is going to cover one primary weakness or loophole that you can fix, as well as some other little bonus questions and bits about Ward. So, let's begin. Most cases of Ward involve the player trying to target the object having to pay a mana cost to stop their spell or ability from being countered, which there isn't really a way you can stop this from happening. However, WotC has done a whole bunch of variations of Ward with some more interesting costs, like having to sacrifice a creature that we see on Forge Neverwinter Charlatan and the very powerful Vein Ripper. And then there is the very difficult cost of sacrifice a legendary artifact or legendary creature that we see on Sauron the Dark Lord, which 9 times out of 10 means you're going to end up having to sacrifice your own commander in order to target his Sauron. So for this scenario, we'll use the Vein Ripper, as this card sees a whole lot of play in Commander, and it's also just a card that is likely to be dealt with by using targeted removal. The reason for this is that a board wipe that typically would destroy creatures will often lead to the Ripper being triggered a bunch of times, leading to the player that probably is the one who cast the board wipe being killed by the controller of the Ripper. So if you're the controller of the Ripper, here's a little trick that you might be able to use to save him from being destroyed. Once your opponent casts their spell to try and deal with your Ripper, it isn't instantly countered if they don't have the ability to pay the ward cost. It's not a payment made in order to be able to target the creature. It's a triggered ability after it's been targeted, and just like any triggered ability, it will go onto the stack before it resolves, forcing that player to pay that cost, which means that you have a chance to change things. If you yourself have the potential to kill off any of their creatures, then you can force them to sacrifice something they didn't want to, like if they controlled a creature with Indestructible and all you have is a destroy spell, or maybe they have a creature with Hexproof, Shroud, or their own ward creature. Then you can use your removal spell on their non-protected creatures and force their hand so that if they don't want their kill spell to be countered, that they now have to sacrifice their protected creature. Kill off the non-protected, and now that ward, sack a creature, makes them choose to get rid of their own creature if they don't want it countered. In a lot of cases, it might just be that they were going to sacrifice a token creature or some non-important, inconsequential creature, so now you can kill their tokens in response and force them to sack their commander. In some cases, though, if they only have one creature, then you can kill off that one creature, and now they have no creature to sacrifice in order to pay that ward cost. Therefore, they cannot make that payment. And when the ward trigger goes to resolve, this means that their kill spell will end up being countered, and your Vein Ripper is safe. This little trick applies to all forms of ward, so if they try to kill your Nine Fingers Keen and they're at a low enough life that you can in response reduce their life to 9 or less, then you can save your Keen. Or if you get some instant speed graveyard removal, then you can save your Axebane Ferox. Keep in mind this little trick for all future versions of Ward, especially when it's being printed on legendary creatures that you end up wanting to use as your commanders. Based on what that ward cost that creature has, if you lean into hating on whatever that ward cost is, then you can increase the effectiveness of that ward for your deck as a whole. Similarly, since this is a triggered ability, you can use things like Lithoform Engine and Strionic Resonator type effects to copy the ward trigger while it is on the stack, and this can help out as well for ward costs that are just the mana costs. You can't really destroy someone's lands to rob them of their mana in response to them trying to kill your ward creatures. For one, land destruction's typically looked down upon, but they'll just tap those lands or mana rocks in response to you doing that, and then they'll use that mana to pay the costs later. But using these sorts of copy effects to copy the ward triggered ability, it at least doubles up on the costs, making them have to pay more. Also, if you control a card like Roaming Throne or Any Joins Up, then these things will also cause your ward abilities to trigger twice. One thing I have seen players try to do is giving their creatures ward in response to someone trying to kill their permanent. For example, you control a Vedalken Orrery, which lets you cast your spells as though they had flash, and then someone targets your Orrery with a disenchant. And then you flash out your Wondrous Crucible, which says that permanents you control have ward 2 of 2 generic mana. This wouldn't actually help to protect your Orrery. The reason for this is the specific wording that is on ward. So let's take a look at the CR and see what that specific wording is. And it's found in section 702.21a. And it says that ward is a triggered ability. Ward cost means whenever this permanent becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless that player pays cost. The confusion comes from why Hexproof and Shroud do work to save your permanent in response. So let's see what Hexproof says in CR 702.11b. Hexproof on a permanent means this permanent can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. So instead of a triggered ability that just happens whenever the object initially becomes a target, Hexproof is just a static ability that is just always stating that it cannot be a target. There is a difference between being a target of a spell and becoming a target of a spell. When casting and resolving a spell, the game checks at 2 different points if a target is legal. When you initially cast it to the stack, and then when you resolve it from the stack. And this means that Hexproof saves the object during both times. They can't even try to cast a spell targeting your Hexproof permanent, and then if you make it Hexproof after they've cast the spell, it will fail to be a legal target when the game again checks it as it resolves. But with Ward, your permanent only becomes a target during that initial check, when it's checked as it's being cast to the stack. But after that, it's already become the target of the spell and will just resolve if it's given Ward later in response. This is why you don't see any instance that gives something ward like we do see a lot of instance that grant hexproof. So this leads into your bonus questions. Let's reuse the same scenario as before. You control Vedalken Orrery, and you have Wondrous Crucible in hand, but this time you also control a Spellskite that's been out for a while. They try to disenchant your Vedalken Orrery. Can you now flash out the Crucible, which gives your Spellskite that ward 2 of generic mana, and then use the Spellskite's activated ability to redirect that disenchant to target itself? Does this now cause the ward to trigger even though the disenchant has already been cast to the stack? Yes or no? And then, if your answer was yes, could you possibly then activate the Spellskite's ability multiple times over and over to keep making it become the target over and over in order to cause the ward to keep triggering over and over? And you know what? Now that I'm actually writing this actually wasn't in my script, so I'm going to say a whole lot now. Could you, if somebody tried to do Hex, I need to look this up. Hex, I believe, is a sorcery. Let me pull this up. Hex. Oh gosh, there's a lot of words. Yeah, sorcery. All right, it says sorcery destroys 6 target creatures. Let's say your opponent casts Hex, and you've got your Spellskite out, but they target 6 different creatures of yours, none of which are Spellskite. Again, we've got the Wondrous Crucible. Could you use the activated ability on your Spellskite multiple times, could you activate it and say, hey, Hex is one of those targets is going to be this Spellskite, and then activate it again and say, ha, one of those other targets is going to be Spellskite. Could you do that multiple times for all 6 of those to have all 6 of them redirect? And if so, would that trigger and trigger and trigger the ward? So would you now have that person having to pay ward, Hex would target 6, so 12 would have to pay ward 12, or ward 2, 6 different times. Yeah, I don't normally do that where it's just on the spot like that. But yeah, hope that's like 3 different bonus questions. So yeah, feel free to put your guys' answers in. This is why I should stick with a script, because I ramble like this. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. Have a good one. Ta-ta. Why didn't I just write that down? I should have written that down. It's a good one, though. We'll see if you guys get that.